For this grammar lesson, we're going to be reviewing some of the punctuation marks that give people trouble. So we'll start off with apostrophes, and in the possessive case, we use these apostrophes to indicate who owns something. Everything before the apostrophe is the thing doing the possessing. So think of the apostrophe as a pointer, indicating who owns that thing that you're talking about here. So sometimes that means that the apostrophe is going to go after the S, and sometimes it's going to go before the S. So in the first example, the performer's costumes, we have the apostrophe after the S. That means that the person that owns it is the performers. The person that owns the costumes is the performers. But if I were to put it after the R, that would mean a performer owns the costumes. So the performer's costumes might sound the same each time, but where the apostrophe goes makes a big difference in determining who you're talking about owning those costumes. Grandmother's recipe, grandmother owns the recipe. Everyone's best friend, whose best friend? Everyone's. And then the children's toys. Now on this one, we're not going to be putting the apostrophe after the S here, because then we'd be saying that the toys belong to the children's, not the children. And this is not Chef on South Park, so we're going to always leave that apostrophe just for before children. Certain words like women and children are automatically plural, so you're not going to be putting an apostrophe after women's or after children's. All right. In the possessive case, when the singular noun ends in an S sound, there's a different kind of rule here. We add only an apostrophe if the noun has two or more syllables, and if the addition of the extra S would make the noun awkward to pronounce. Otherwise, we add both the apostrophe and the S. So in the first example, for conscience sake, it's hard to say consciences, so that's why we put just the apostrophe, not an apostrophe S. In the second example, same kind of thing. Xerxes' army, hard to say Xerxes's, so we just put Xerxes apostrophe. In the third example, Miss Schwartz's car, not difficult to say. It's just one syllable, not hard to say, so we actually put the two S sounds, Schwartz's. And the same thing with the last example, the witness's testimony. It's not hard to say witnesses, even though there are three S's there and it looks strange. There is an apostrophe S, not just an apostrophe on witnesses when it's possessive. Here's some words that cause problems as well. These are already possessive pronouns that don't have apostrophes in them. I know that it's would mess me up all the time when I was in school. I put IT apostrophe S just because it seemed like that should be the possessive, but it turns out ITS is already possessive, just like hers, yours, and theirs are already possessive, even without apostrophes. Now hyphens, another punctuation mark that sometimes causes some issues. And one of the things to know about hyphens is it's a joiner of words. So you use them you hyphenate numbers that are compound numbers, meaning they have a number like a 20 and a 1 or a 40 and a 5. It's not just one number, it's two different numbers together. So 53, 78 get hyphenated, and all the numbers between 21 and 99 that are compound get hyphenated. We also use them with fractions that are used as modifiers. Notice that we use one with 2/3 majority, but we don't use one with 2/3 of them, because 2/3 in this case is modifying of, so that's the preposition, it's not modifying a noun, so that means that we're not going to hyphenate it in this case. You also hyphenate a compound adjective when it precedes the noun it modifies. So it's an interesting twist that when you have a noun right after this two-word expression that modifies that noun, then you do hyphenate it. But notice here, we don't have a noun right after a paper that is well written, or we don't have a noun right after well written here, I guess I should say. So that's why it's not hyphenated. So the well-written paper does get hyphenated, but a paper that is well written does not. World famous skier gets hyphenated, not a skier who is world famous. So just the words by themselves don't get hyphenated, but when they're modifying a noun, they do. Also, do not hyphenate modifiers before a noun when they end in ly. Now, don't ask me why this is, but we don't hyphenate clearly written, but we do hyphenate well written. We don't hyphenate partly cloudy. The ly words don't get hyphenated. That's basically what it comes down to. Also, we have some hyphens that we have to look up that always, these words are always written with hyphens. So up to date, well informed, those always get hyphenated. So do certain prefixes and suffixes like ex and self and elect. And so those types of things, you have to look them up to see which ones get hyphens. Finally, dashes. Whereas hyphens kind of join words together, dashes are interrupters. So a dash looks like a long hyphen. If you can't insert a dash, try 2 hyphens or just put a space on either side of a hyphen. So dashes are used for interrupting, and hyphens are more used for joining those 2 words together. So I've put a space on either side of my hyphen here, and that way it's looking more like a dash. The team's leading scorer, dash, I can't remember her name, dash, is also an excellent defensive player. All right, so what we do is sometimes we have an interrupter to the sentence. Normally we could put 2 commas around it, or we could put parentheses around it, but it's an abrupt interruption of the thought in the sentence. And we can also put 2 dashes on either side of that interrupter. We can also use a dash to replace a colon when it means namely. Amanda joined the chorus for one reason, and then we have our dash, she loves to sing. So you can use them that way. Finally, if there's a dialogue and somebody gets their thought interrupted, or they're abruptly interrupted by somebody else, or they just cut off what they're saying, you would interrupt it with a dash. All I'm trying to say, Rudy began as the phone rang. But if you wanted to indicate that the dialogue was fading out or wasn't understandable, use ellipses instead. So those are our rules for apostrophes, hyphens, and dashes.